All right. Okay. Welcome everyone to this event on clean construction. Very happy to be organizing an event on this topic here. It's something that I'm very passionate about myself, and we have a great panel with us today. My name is Christian Eriksson. I'm the head of policy and research at the Bellona Foundation. We, as an environmental NGO, have been able to set up a pavilion of our own here at COP26. Very happy about that, and to use that to talk about actual climate and environmental solutions with a focus on electrification, industrial decarbonization, carbon negative solutions that we need for the next years and a couple of decades towards net zero and beyond. And so today we'll be talking about construction and cities' role in really progressing this issue. We in Bellona started working on this 6 years ago in close collaboration with Oslo Municipality, represented today, and also coining the term zero emission construction sites, which we think has gotten real traction over these years. It's been very interesting to see. So much progress has been made since then. We're not anywhere close to making a dent in emissions at the scale that really counts. So today we'll be talking about construction and cities' role and how we can engage with the global construction value chain to really accelerate development around the world. So we'll have a few short remarks first, and then a quick panel. But before we invite the mayors to the stage, I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Mark Watts, Executive Director at C40, to say a few words to us about the city's role and how they can work together before we kick off the construction talk. Mr. Watts.
And there you go. Great, thank you, Christian. So, well, I'm gate crashing this meeting, but really delighted to do so because I think the topic of clean construction is a massively important one. It's kind of the next big frontier. But you're going to hear about that from the people who really know about it. But what I can say, why I think cities and city governments are so central on this is, number one, when you look at the political leadership at the moment in relation to climate, the only place amongst major political leaders that you've got leaders that are genuinely setting science-based targets around climate, i.e. looking at what the science says is the budget that they can have to stay within with, and then setting policies to achieve it, is at the mayoral level, and particularly within the C40 cities that I represent, and we have two of the leading mayors representing here today. The second is the mayors really collaborate with each other. So when a good idea emerges in one city, it now very quickly gets copied and replicated, and so you can shift global markets. And you're about to hear, I'm sure, two incredibly good examples about this. What Mayor Lopez is doing in Bogota has lit up, in fact, not just in Latin America, the whole of C40 in seeing that you can shift very rapidly to electric vehicles and then to a truly multimodal transport system from a difficult starting point, and not in the richest city in the world, but in a city in the global south. And from Governing Mayor Johansson on clean construction, who has, I would say, personally single-handedly driven the agenda of clean construction within C40, so that we've gone from one city, Oslo, that's really taken it on, to 4 pioneer cities, 20 or 30 behind them now that are looking at what's being done in Oslo and will be copying it very soon. So I think this dialogue between mayors is not just about what's happening in 2 cities, but what will be very soon happening in 100 and then many more cities and changing global markets. I wish I could stay for the whole discussion, but I have to move off. But thanks so much for letting me join. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you very much to Mr. Mark Watts of the C40 group of leading cities around the world working on climate issues. Now, very happy to introduce Mr. Raymond Johansen, Governing Mayor of Oslo, to say a few words about Oslo's work on construction and what we are looking forward to from that side.
Thank you very much, and happy to see you here from Bogota and Oslo. It's quite different. It's a huge city, Bogota. I have the privilege to be there several times. But let me also use this opportunity to thank Fredrik and Bellona, because actually the clean construction, it started with a cooperation between some of the buildings entity in Oslo called Omsorgsbygg and Bellona. That was the very beginning, when they started to explore the possibility to have fossil-free construction sites. And it started, I remember the meeting, it started to invite the different entrepreneurs, and then they bought in 1 electric diggers. Now, some few years, it's just 5-6 years ago, now it's more than 250 electric diggers. And why is this so important? Because in Oslo, we have 3 challenges when it's come to CO2 emission. Of course, it's traffic, both from private cars and then from big trailers. Secondly, it's from the construction sites, and then from the waste industry, the incineration plants. So we try to do our best when it's come to limited access for private cars, which is very conflicting. It's very, very difficult. But then to look into what we can do to use our purchasing power, the public procurement, to actually affect the market. That is the most important detail. We are a big buyer, the Municipality of Oslo. We buy goods and services for approximately €2 billion each year. So we use this power to affect the market in a cleaner way. So we have started very ambitious with the clean construction sites on our own projects. Now we want to have it in the plan framework. So also the state and the big builders also, we force them to use electricity when it comes to big jumpers, bulldozers, even all machinery have to be electric. And we will, of course, provide them with hydropower, so it's clean. But core thing here is to affect the market, use our purchasing power of the public procurement, and also to create new jobs and green jobs and create a new industry. So it, of course, has very positive impact for the overall air quality of Oslo, and of course also the CO2 emission. So I'm so happy that it started in Oslo, because my main ambition is that Oslo is big enough and small enough to be a test bed for new solutions. Here is one solution. The electrification of cars is another solution. Chasing power is another thing. So we can scale it up and export it, where it's even more important in big cities like Bogota, like Lima, like New York, like Shanghai. So this is the beginning. And once again, thank you to Bellona to be such so instrumental in putting this on the agenda and push it all time. Yes, I think I'll start with that.
Thank you, Raymond Johansen. Next up on stage is Ms. Claudia Lopez Hernandez from Bogota. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be with the mayor of Oslo. I heard of you and your city, which I hope to get to know soon. And thank you so much for inviting me to this discussion, which is critically important. As Raymond was saying, Bogota is a very different city. It's an 8 million people city in the global south. Almost half of our emissions came from transportation. Roughly 13 to 15% from waste management, which unfortunately is done through landfills, which is awful. And we need to transform that into waste to energy, which is what we're trying to achieve in the next 10 years. And the third source of GHG emissions are construction. So that's the third topic. It's the third in line that is still very important. It could account for around 20% of our GHG emissions. So we have a great opportunity we're trying to take advantage is that after 70 years of failing in reach an agreement of a new land use master development plan, finally, we hope this year is going to be approved in our city council. So we already approved last year our climate action plan, 15 goals for resilience and 11 goals for adaptation. So what we're doing is to include those measures into our land use master development plan. And regarding the construction sector, it is important because it's the first time we're gonna issue not a building code, but an eco-urbanism code. It's the first time in Bogota's history that we're gonna set rules, incentives, and criteria to build either public or private infrastructure, public or private buildings, in a way that incentivize low carbon materials, sustainable drainage system, we call suits, green vertical gardens, for example, and also green roofs. So now it will be included into our land use master development plan, and it will be included into our construction rules. It's the first time that Bogota is going to do that. But at the same time, we need to balance that in the sense to allow a transition and to align fiscal and economic national incentives, local master urban development incentives, and at the same time, incentives for the companies, the private companies, to include these standards without affecting our goals for affordable housing, because of course we need to manage and to balance these two things. So we're going to incentivize, first of all, to set the example in our own space, which is trying to set the example in our public buildings, starting in the mayor's office, which is not properly an energy efficiency building. In fact, this is from 1905. So we hope that schools, hospitals, and the mayor's office will transform into solar energy, for example, into more sustainable water management issues, so we can reutilize water in our buildings, and also to have vertical gardens and huertas. How to say huertas, Carolina? Yes. Herbal gardens, maybe? So those are the three things that we're going to start by doing in our own buildings, starting by 400 public education buildings, our own mayor's office buildings, and in the master development plan, we plan to build 60 schools in the next 15 years. So all these schools will be built with these eco sustainable building rules and criteria. We're contracting out 6 new hospitals, for example, in our 4-year term. And in the next 15 years, there will be 24 new hospitals in the city. All of them will be built according to these new rules. So we think that the public infrastructure with public buildings can set the example and use actually all these incentives, fiscal incentives, new rules in our own buildings. Also, middle class and upper class housing, so that we can allow the whole industry to understand and use better these instruments in such a way that they can use it also in affordable housing without raising too much the price. So we're going to sort of start by the public buildings, then the middle income class housing, so that we allow the transition to the affordable housing to include these measures too, but in a 50-year plan so we don't affect the market. The other area, which I think this is very important, is we need we have different cases, but I think the example of Oslo will be incredibly useful in that sense. We need to prove to private companies that this is a good business. I mean, it's not only good for the planet, of course it is. It's good for the environment, but it's also good for their own pockets, right? But we need to demonstrate that to them. And then we're going to start setting our own example. We want to demonstrate that with the same budget, we can build an eco-sustainable school, right? Which is much better than we did before, and we don't need more budget. It's just using specific materials, using the fiscal incentives, using the city incentives to build these new things. So I think at this moment in Bogota, rules are set up. Hopefully by December, we're going to have our new master land use development plan. But the big challenge, I have 2 more years in my term. So in the next 2 years, my big challenge is to bring private companies, private examples that show our companies, local and national companies, that this is not only good for the planet, but it's good for their own pockets.
Yes.
And to encourage them to use these kind of things in our city. Because construction at this moment, in the post-pandemic, in the post-COVID, is very important because construction is a very important source of jobs in Colombia. In fact, public infrastructure housing is the driving force of the economic recovery of Colombia and Bogota at this time. So there is already enough money and enough incentives there, but we need to make sure that this money is invested properly in these kind of rules and they take full advantage of the opportunities and incentives that we have here. And at the same time, also pushing a little bit, right, from the control perspective of our thing. So controlling that the private companies actually enforce the rules that we approve in the master development plan. So it's at the same time sort of a carrot and stick in the sense of controlling and enforcing, but at the same time incentivizing and promoting and setting the example, I think, in our own public buildings. That will be in the next years. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor Lopez. And to round off the introductory remarks, we have Fredrik Hauge, founder of the Bellona Foundation, to give some brief perspectives from the NGO side.
I think this is really inspiring. And it reminds me about when we imported the first electric car to Norway back in 1988, together with the pop group AHA. And we started to drive without paying the road toll. And we got fined. We refused to pay the fine. The car got confiscated to be sold on a car auction. And nobody else wanted to buy back a rebuilt Fiat Panda that went 40 kilometers. So we bought it, and the car auction was outside the road toll. We got a new fine. The car was confiscated altogether, I think it was 17 times. Last month in Norway, 78% of all new car sales was electric. Sometimes it takes time. But what has happened here is a perfect example on how you create an example that makes precedence. When we started to work with Omsorgsbyggen and the Municipality of Oslo 6 years ago, I think quite many thought we contributed to the environment because they laughed at us, and laughing is also good for the environment. What has happened since is quite amazing. And it goes fast now, much faster than when we started with the electric cars. But in Norway, we got an understanding that batteries could do a part of the job by the electric car revolution, and public acceptance is extremely important to achieve our goals. To build cities is, of course, extremely complicated, and it's, I think in Oslo, the emission from the construction sites was around 17% back in 2015, so it's a substantial contribution to the emissions of Oslo. The work in Oslo has shown that it's technically possible to do a change. The price of batteries has, since we started Raimond in 2015, dropped dramatically. So now it's possible to put in for the communities in the tender that we need this kind of solutions. And the market is listening and moving. Of course, we got inspired, and we also had to think a little bit, because in 2008, it was about the same time that Tesla started to come with the Roadsters. We had to move office. And we were offered to build a new office and said, okay, if you're going to move to your facility, you are going to build us the best environmental building in Norway. We said to the constructor. We did. And then we said, anyone who beats us, get a bottle of wine, because this is not a record we want to keep. We want to be beaten all the time, yeah? That was back in 2008. We built, I think we moved in 2010. But we were still frustrated, because when we were building the most environmentally friendly building in Norway, we had a lot of emissions, both from the use of material and from the construction. And we don't like that. And then we started to look into the construction sector. We started then practical operations in 2015. Raymond taught, we just call Raymond in Norway, because everyone knows him. And now it's 250 diggers there. This is good for health, this is good for economy, and this is good for the public acceptance. We need to see leadership. What's interesting is that in Norway, we also will get now the first global cement producer that goes in carbon capture and storage. So in 2 years' time, we could even put in the tender, and that's not possible to do everywhere to do carbon capture and storage, but in Norway, we will not get this. So now we also can put in the tender that we don't have any more public construction without using concrete from carbon capture produced without CO2 emissions. And all this together will really reduce the total impact from building cities. In the future, the construction industry will see a lot of changes. We will see new solutions. We will see buildings be rehabilitated different than before. And this is also a task that we in Bellona want to take on as a next step. We are living in Norway, in one of the richest countries in the world. So we can afford to take the early mover and risk takers cost. And we should do that with all the petroholic. We are a nice little selfish country of petroholic, I used to say, but we have a lot of income. And this needs to be spent well, and to be early movers, to take the early cost, make the examples that create precedents. We're very grateful to the leadership of Oslo to do that, because we're a little country. Everyone is talking about that we are really red alert now. We need to show people that changes are possible, that solutions are there. Apathy is the biggest threat, even bigger than the climate change. By doing this, you're showing leaderships that we are really grateful for. Anytime, you know, you can call me late in the evening, early in the morning. We will be there, we will support you, and we're really grateful for creating this new solution. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fredrik. You can stay here, and then we'll invite the mayors back on stage for a few short questions. So I guess I'll just start with you, Mr. Johansen. How do you see Oslo's role going forward in C40 and in the Big Buyers Initiative, for example, in the European Union, and these sort of engagements to drive this agenda even further forward?
First, I have to see that we have been through the pandemic for the last 18 months. So this is my first trip out of Norway since January 2020. So it's nice to be here, so to meet colleagues, to really push the agenda, because now we have been just focusing on the pandemic. But I'm very encouraged by the initiative, and that many cities that now are a part of this initiative. And so I'm very optimistic. And I think that because in general, the development when it comes to climate change is it's very worrisome. But to see there's a clear plan out of it, that we can actually do something. As you rightly mentioned, to create jobs, to see it in a positive way, and also clean air and less noise. Because for the first time in mankind's history, more than 50% of the world's population lives in cities, and that will increase people living in urban area. So we have limited time. This is have to be a very effective measures. So today you have discussed it with London. I know that some of the other big cities are in it, and we will continue also to push our own government. Now we have a new governmental area which we are building in Oslo, and I hope that can be also a model boiled down to all the details, choosing the materials, the construction sites itself, and the whole process. What will you do with the masses also? So that's another discussion as well. So yes, I'm very optimistic to get the private enterprises on board, seeing something in it for them, using the public procurement in an effective way to push the agenda. But because here they see that we're going to use it, so it's much easier for them to do this heavy investment in electric diggers and jumpers and whatever. So optimism.
Yeah. And Ms. Lopez, so Bogota has also been very active in these international forums on doing construction. And one of the points that you were touching on, which is, I think we can agree is crucially important, is proving that this is good for business.
Yeah.
And, you know, developing the examples that show also private companies that they can take a step into this. How do you see Bogota moving towards getting these private examples into reality?
Well, I think we have a momentum. I really think that the children, youth people, women understand perfectly what we need to change. Otherwise, I wouldn't be mayor, right? I'm the first woman to be elected mayor in Bogota. I'm the daughter of a teacher. I'm like a miracle in Colombian politics. And it's not precisely because I'm on a star. It's because my people is changing, their agenda is changing, their priorities are changing, and they're going to push forward the political scenario to move in the direction of that change. So that's another source of hope. And the other thing is, I think that the COVID-19 pandemic showed us that we have the knowledge, we were able to produce. Never ever forget this, right? It seems like climate change requires a lot of technological change and willingness. Let's just remember that humanity was able to produce in a year a couple of 6 vaccines able to deal with COVID-19. It was never ever done before. If we were able to deal with this issue in a year, why are we not going to be able to take climate change in a decade? Not in 2050. I share the vision that Mike Bloomberg was telling us this morning in our C40s meeting. So, well, if you're gonna, actually treat people like idiots, you set goals for the 2050. You actually want to be serious with people, you set goals for maybe 2030, which is, a decade to achieve. And I think the technology is there, right? People was brave enough, as you were telling us and giving us the example, to lead the change, to include new things, to prove new things. And I think this combination of the population of voters, willingness to change and demand for change, the technological base, which is right there, and the political guts, right, to do the right thing, even though it's not going to be popular in the short term. I'm not the most popular person in my city at this point, because so more change in such a short period of time is sometimes painful, but it is the right thing to do. So we cannot be afraid of doing the right thing at the right moment. And I think for Bogota it's even more challenging because, I'm so grateful that we are invited and recognized as leadership. All we're doing is trying to do in the next 15 years what we should have done in the last 50. But we didn't, and we don't have more time to waste. We don't have more time to discussions and stuff. An 8 million city cannot run on diesel buses, period. Period. We're gonna end that discussion. We need to have a multimodal, clean public transportation system. That's what Oslo had a century ago, right? And let's see this example in the country that we're speaking with in Norway, and the city we're at this moment. Glasgow was the champion of the carbon industrial era. And it changed completely. It took them a century. We can afford that. Norway was just a petroleum champion, right? And it's changing completely. And Oslo is a great example of it. And it takes them maybe some decades. So we can, as the world, and especially the global south, we can take the advantage of all the technological advance that the global north has done so far. All the private enterprise base for this to be possible that you already build them and can prove and show our own business companies to do. And the demand for change of our population to do the same, but in a shorter period of time. So I'm absolutely hopeful. I know it's going to be a little bit painful. It takes guts not to move from the right path, even though it might not be popular for a couple of years. But this is the right thing to do, and we cannot waste a minute. So I'm so grateful to be invited by this and to have the opportunity to work with the C40s mayors and to meet with people and foundations and enterprises that are working on this issue and can help us to achieve our goals.
But you will win the next election also.
But there is no re-election in Bellona.
It's just a 4 year term.
It's just 4 years term and there is no re-election. So
It's
I only
Latin
have
American
4
thing,
years.
but then you can wait for
And that's
4
the
years.
Latin American foolish
Yes.
thing ever.
This is it.
But that's how it is.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
So, Frederick, when we hear this kind of signals from Bogota, for example, we see that technologies are there, price of batteries is dropping, and these positive signals emerge. How do we actually make this happen? When the way that we have been working in Oslo has been based a lot of dialogue, on trusting, on partners trusting each other. How do you see this going forward?
It's something about we have to go green by black numbers. But then it's what you put into these calculations, yeah? So Norway is a quite high-cost country, but each fossil fuel car costs us around more than $2,000 a year in health cost. And each time somebody buys a fossil fuel car, they have expected lifetime in average in Norway in 17 years. That's quite a lot of money, yeah? The health cost of one dumper or one digger is much more than one electric car. And I think it's very difficult, and we have to work on explaining how we integrate this in our figures and in our economy. And for example, if you have a workplace beside a new construction site, the cost of sound and vibration and noise and all the gases is quite high. And it reminds me when we built the first electrical sail ship and took the constructors with us to sail to the east coast of Greenland. There was no vibration, no emission, and no pollution. And that is and now sound, yeah? And that is what I'm dreaming about when the next construction site comes close to my office, that I still could make my telephone conference, that I still could have my meeting, and then not sitting like this because of the noise and the vibration from the fossil fuel machines. And I think we need to explain the public even better that this is also a way to look at the economy to save money. We have been early movers, it's been expensive. The price of batteries is dropping dramatically. This is going to be a cheaper way of doing it. So many ways. And that is how we need to look and how to get public acceptance for this kind of transitions.
I think there is a good example of that when we have the first zero-emission construction site in Oslo, very close to City Hall, and the coffee shop just next to the construction site. It was basically 2 meters from the door of the coffee shop to the walls of the construction site, and they had their doors open continually through the day because there was no noise and there was no vibrations and this type of thing. So that was also very interesting and encouraging to see how the technology actually works.
And think of the construction workers.
Absolutely.
Many of them are immigrants in Norway, so they are not well organized, not put forward many demands. So we need also ourselves together with trade unions to push that agenda also, because the way of living for many of the construction workers is very, very tough. So I think we also sort of use that element much more actively.
Yeah.
It's an aspect to that, because we have studies, for example, from electrification of ships and also taxi drivers that moves from a fossil fuel car, and you get away the vibration. You get much more tired in a car with vibrations or in a ship with vibrations. So I think to go with electric also will reduce the amount of accidents in the construction industry, because people will not be so exhausted working in this kind of electric machines instead of fossil cars or engines.
Very good points. So we're nearing the end of the session, but I'd like to open for if there are any questions from the audience, then you're very welcome to pose them now. Yeah, please.
Nice event to you. Very encouraging and I'm very thankful for. So my question, I think the message basically because of location, it would be quite difficult to transport it.
They're 2,000 kilometers
Yes, and then it's
away from the sea.
So, biochar, it's carbonization, and the materials. First, positive, less, it's less than it's also better than the standard. Adding more technical problem because biochar, it's bio and concrete, it doesn't really work. So this biochar that it makes it better actually. So I understand that. Plus it's better for the also did it as well, so that easier. But I think the concrete has a bigger impact because it's 1 gigaton, so it's really those types of solutions. Now, generally, I think that we're coming seeing how progressive we are, that those types of solutions are quite small.
Great revolutions came from small solutions.
I think that's a very interesting perspective. I love biochar, yeah? So we work a lot on that, both to produce biomass in the future that's going to be biochar in the desert. But it's a little bit secret still. But I have a plan to use biochar to make the first gigafactory of batteries in Norway carbon negative. So we need to talk. And then we could reduce even the footprint of the batteries in the construction machines. So, but it's secret, so don't tell anyone.
So just for our viewers online, the comment was on CCS, carbon capture and storage, not necessarily being available everywhere. We need to look into lots of different solutions on how to handle carbon, and biochar as one of those, or technical carbon as you call it. And yeah, but it's a very interesting perspective, and these are the kind of solutions that we need to look more into to ensure funding, seed funding now, development of them, so that we have also carbon negative solutions towards 2050, which really need to be into negative territory.
And one clarification, because now I started to get interested in the geology in Colombia, because we don't need to store carbon capture and storage in the geology under the sea. It could be interesting geology also in Colombia to do this kind of work. So we have a huge team working on this, and we need to talk about the geology in Colombia too. I understand, yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions before we round off? Okay. Thank you very much to
My
our
pleasure.
panel,
Thank you.
to our distinguished guests, mayors of Oslo and Bogota, and Fredrik Haugen. Thank you very much, and to all of you for coming.
Thank you.
So we have 2 more